Ann Coulter made headlines for the comments that she made on this show last night about who she believes is the most conservative candidate in the Republican field. Listen to this.
I think the two most conservative candidates, and look, people keep talking about a brokered convention, knock it off, Republicans. These are our candidates. We've seen them. We've seen the debates.
I agree with that.
The two most conservative candidates who are still standing now are Michelle Bachmann and Mitt Romney. Of the available candidates, Romney is by far the most conservative, tied with Michelle Bachmann, and he has a proven ability to win in a state like Massachusetts.
Let me agree with you. All right, but the question remains, who do the voters think is the most conservative candidate? Joining me now to weigh in on all of this, author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, Culture of Corruption, Michelle Malkin is here. How are you?
Good. How are you, Sean?
I'm just flooding through my email here, and I got to tell you, there's resentment building. And the resentment is building against establishment people telling conservatives who they ought to be voting for. This NRO editorial is not going over well from the people that I know. Wanted to get your reaction.
Well, to answer your question about Ann Coulter's description of Mitt Romney as conservative, there are a lot of words to describe Mitt Romney, but honestly, conservative has never been at the top of the list. And I think that the frustration from the grassroots and Tea Party activists has been in watching people parade around in Halloween costumes all year long, pretending to be something that they aren't and never have been in order to win office. And the entire reason we had a Tea Party revolution over the last couple of years was not simply as a reaction to the big government impulses and corruption of the Obama administration, but also about the ideological corruption of Beltway Republicans. As for National Review, I have an immense amount of respect for the staff there, for people who have been in the fight for conservatism and conservative policies for a long, long time. They deserve respect. I also think it's a little ridiculous to start calling people establishment who have been outside the establishment for a long time. And even if you're in Washington, you may not necessarily be of Washington. We can all disagree about these candidates. I am not on anyone's team, and I think that puts us, you and I, Sean, in a unique position.
Right. But
I'm telling you,
well, I'm telling you what I'm reading and people are telling me is that, you know what, we know the strengths and weaknesses of the candidates. Yeah, I've asked Romney about Romney Care. I've asked Romney about changing positions. I've asked Gingrich about Paul Ryan. I've asked him about the Nancy Pelosi issue. I've asked about his personal life. We've asked if he can be disciplined. I've asked all these questions of these guys. And I think these questions at some point have been asked to death. And it seems to me that there is so much scrutiny on so many conservatives that go on for so long. The Democrats get a pass, and then the fear begins to build. Oh, conservative, you know what? They're too flawed. This one's too flawed. And the most flawed person in this race this year is going to be Barack Obama, who has the worst record of any president in modern history. And it gets a little frustrating to me to see this infighting and this nitpicking on all of these guys.
Well, I understand your frustration, but I certainly don't think it's nitpicking to look at each and every one of these candidates
and ask whether they're... Michelle, you're misunderstanding me. I am saying that...
No, I'm not.
There comes a point,
I think you're frustrated,
we got it.
Sean,
we understand their
that.
strengths and weaknesses. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And I'm saying that I think it's important to dig up Mitt Romney's statements when he describes himself as a progressive several years ago. And it's just as important to talk about Newt Gingrich's actions that bespeak of a very troublesome progressivism and, in some cases, very uncontrolled sense of narcissism. And look, the Tea Party, who is the Tea Party and who is the establishment? The fact is that although National Review and a lot of Washington Republicans and conservatives don't like Newt Gingrich, a lot of Tea Party conservatives don't either. And they have not forgiven him for the New York 23 misjudgment and the smearing that he did of grassroots conservatives who opposed his attempt to try and voice a big labor rhino in New York.
All right, you know what? I will concede there is not the perfect candidate. But this is our slate of candidates. And at the end of the day, Michelle, I've looked at all of their strengths, all of their weaknesses, and I think all of these candidates are infinitely better than the disaster that we've got in Washington today. And it seems that there is a culture, to use your term, culture of corruption. There's a culture among Republicans and conservatives where they're not happy until they eat their own, spit them out, destroy each other, and then say they're not going to vote for the other one. And I think at some point they got to realize there's going to be one winner in this. And it's not going to be the establishment deciding. It's going to be the people in this country that are Republican, that vote in the primary, that decide. And frankly, I don't think anybody's one endorsement is going to matter that much.
I certainly agree with that. I think it's all common sense that you're talking about. On the other hand, this is the primary process. This is nothing new. There is nothing unprecedented about Republican candidates going after each other in this clawing fight for the general election battle. It is healthy.
It's healthy to a point. But then it gets to the point where it's unhealthy and counterproductive. Yeah. And I think that the words of Republicans are going to come back in the general campaign used by Obama.
Well, I think that the unhealthiest thing would be to whitewash these flaws.
I'm not talking about whitewashing anything.
Circle the wagons. And I also think it would be unhealthy to pretend that these candidates are something that they are not.
All right, let's let them pummel each other and forget about who the real person that needs to be defeated here. And I think there comes a point where it's a fine line distinction, and I think we'll make a big mistake. But I got to run. Good to see you.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Time to check in.